Good morning. It's great to have you all here. I'm Bill Rosehart, Dean of the Schulich School of Engineering. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our first Schulich Connects of the 2020-2021 academic year. Our panel topic this morning, Engineering Entrepreneurs, is an opportunity to look at how the engineering mindset positions us to excel at entrepreneurship and launching startups. Today, our panel of engineering alumni and entrepreneurs will respond to questions and give us insight into the entrepreneurial journey. A few housekeeping items in our new world of remote online discussions. We will have a Q&A following our panel discussion. Please ask us your questions through the Zoom question and answer function. We are recording this webinar, so any questions you ask during the Q&A will be posted to the public later. If you think of questions during the panel discussion, feel free to post them at any time. I'll be directing your questions to the panelists for the later portion of today's Schulich Connects. Before we start the panel, let's look at entrepreneurship across the Schulich School of Engineering. Engineering entrepreneurship is a key priority in our new programs and student initiatives. Most recently, Schulich helped start Launchpad in partnership with the Hunter Hub for Entrepreneurial Thinking. Launchpad gives students from across the university an entrepreneurial experience while they study. They bring ideas for new ventures to the program, gaining access to mentors, workshops, funding, and step-by-step help. The students in Launchpad learn from their successes and their failures as they work to make their creative business ventures into realities. We are also promoting entrepreneurship through our Maker Multiplex as well as Zeta, our digital innovation hub. In these facilities, they can experience iterative design and develop, build, and test prototypes for their engineering solutions. Student opportunities like these, augmented by professional development and leadership training, is what gives the Schulich School of Engineering and its students an edge. Our engineering leadership program gives students experience in leading teams, managing projects, navigating conflict, and more. They start to develop their professional skills now before they graduate. It is all our goal to foster the growth of engineering leaders who can thrive in whatever the future brings their way. Our dual degree program in business and engineering enables students to complete both degrees in 5 years. This joint program with the Haskayne School of Business gives students the added benefit of a combined knowledge of business and engineering. Students learn the principles and practices of developing new ventures and managing small to medium-sized companies and complete an engineering major at the same time. In addition, we've added an entrepreneurial stream to our 4th year engineering design capstone project courses. This gives students the opportunity to develop their own business ideas and engineering solutions, maybe even leading to the launch of a startup. Now, let me introduce our esteemed panel of engineering alumni. They're everywhere. Phil and Sebastian, coffee roasters. And today, we have the Phil half of the partnership joining our engineering entrepreneurship panel. Phil Robertson co-founded Phil and Sebastian Coffee in 2007. Phil graduated from engineering in 2000 and quickly shifted gears. Since launching the company, Phil's obsession is to improve coffee quality from seed to cup. Leveraging his engineering past, he's written custom roasting control software and modified numerous pieces of coffee making equipment. Our next panelist is Natasha Spokes. Natasha graduated from our geomatics engineering program in 2005 with a minor in entrepreneurship. She launched Far Closer Travel Incorporated in 2015, a startup connecting travelers to niche experiences around the globe. She is also a prime stream manager with the Creative Destruction Lab, providing mentorship and growth opportunities to seed stage science and technology startups. Finally, let me introduce Jeff LaFrenz. He was recently awarded the University of Calgary Alumni Arch Award for service and was recognized for his philanthropy and volunteering commitments to the Schulich School of Engineering and the University of Calgary. Jeff is past chair of the Schulich Alumni Council and founder of VisWorks, an award-winning software solutions company. VisWorks specializes in leading-edge human engagement technology, such as virtual and augmented reality, to solve real-world business challenges. Jeff completed his undergrad and master's degrees in electrical engineering at the University of Calgary. He is a serial entrepreneur with over 30 years experience in digital technology commercialization. Panelists, say good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And all right, let's get things going. First question to you. When you studied engineering, did you think you'd become an entrepreneur and launch your own endeavors? Why don't we start with you, Natasha?
It might sound unbelievable, but no. Even though I did a minor in entrepreneurship, it was more of a curiosity thing. Like, what is this whole business entrepreneurship side of things? It wasn't quite as, I guess, trendy as it is now. So I was really looking at entrepreneurship as a way to differentiate my degree, but I never saw myself in that entrepreneur founder role when I was going through my degree.
What about you, Phil? When you were studying for your third year chemical engineering exams, was a vision of starting a coffee company dancing through your head? You were probably drinking lots of coffee, but were you planning on starting a company?
Yeah, I certainly was drinking a lot of coffee. You know, it's very similar experience for me to Natasha. I did not plan to be an entrepreneur. I enjoyed engineering greatly. I loved university, and I got into the working world and was very excited. I was all gung-ho, and I worked in, I was electrical engineering, incidentally, but I worked in a couple different companies, and there's things I loved about the job. I loved the technical challenges. I loved the, overall, the overarching challenges that we were facing as engineers. But there were things that were missing for me. And I have this like one little story, if I can quickly share it. So I remember that I was sitting one day at my desk. I'm losing my voice, of course. I was sitting one day at my desk, and I was making a cup of coffee, and I used to have this hand grinder, and I'd grind my coffee. And I very distinctly remember doing that. I remember drinking the coffee. I remember what it tasted like, but I don't remember what I was working on that day. And the thing is, I liked my job. I really did. And so it wasn't that I was disengaged with my job. It's just that I knew in that moment that something was missing for me, and I wanted and needed more. And then my journey was very meandering. I went on a big European trip for a year to learn about wine, because I love that too. And then I came back, and I wanted to do engineering, but I wanted something more social. And then it just sort of all coalesced. But yeah, it certainly was not a straight line. It was not, I didn't start, I want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have this vision. It really did form organically through my own experiences in life. So, I mean, that to me it's been really exciting and fulfilling. But yeah, it was not a straight line at all.
And what about you, Jeff? I've heard so many people, including myself, describe you as a serial entrepreneur. Did you know that was going to be your path in second year electrical engineering?
No. I wish I could say yes, but no. particularly when we were in university, the challenges, the interest, the exploring new concepts. I love to, again, like Phil said, I loved engineering itself. I loved what I was doing. I loved learning new things about technology and the fundamentals of how all this stuff is going to work. But that being said, like Phil, I ended up leaving and joining a large company. In my case, McDonald Bentweiler and Associates out of Vancouver, working on large-scale systems engineering projects. But I was never quite settled with that's my life. And so I did actually, with some friends of mine at that company, start my first company, or our first attempt at a company, I should say. We never actually got to company status. Reasonably closely after I graduated. So I didn't really consider it during my education, but I did find shortly thereafter that I wasn't settled with just being an employee. I was interested in doing more and doing more things that were beyond what being an employee of a company would be about. But that being said, I still worked in that role for companies for many years. So it's not like I immediately shifted over. I had multiple different times where I tried to transition, and I eventually made the jump, but it took a while.
We are seeing a lot of tech entrepreneurial companies in Calgary and certainly across Canada and North America, led, co-founded by engineers. And maybe starting with you, Jeff, what are the attributes? What is the training? What's the special sauce that you get in an engineering degree that seems to lead to success for engineers that want to go into an entrepreneurial path?
I wish there was one thing. Certainly the root of it is mindset. No matter what your background is, no matter where you come from educationally, the mindset you have is really kind of leading the whole thing. Engineering specifically, though, if I look at my training and my background, it was really around the not necessarily selling for the status quo. We're trained as engineers to really identify and address challenges that we may encounter in our jobs, and that mindset, that ability to kind of look at things and say, it doesn't have to be that way. I can make it better. That's kind of core to what it takes to be an entrepreneur, because you have to be able to look at the world from a different set of eyes, a set of eyes that says, the status quo isn't necessarily required, and if we can find new ways to make it better, then there's an opportunity there. If somebody's having a challenge, if I'm having a pain or somebody else is having a pain about something, some people, and unfortunately I think most people, will just complain about, okay, that's an issue, I don't like it, et cetera, et cetera. As an entrepreneur, you look at it as, oh, really? Well, how can I make that better? How can I address that pain? How can I improve the life of somebody by bringing upon my background in understanding systems and understanding process and understanding how you actually pull together a solution. But I think one of the core things that I know now is certainly much more part of engineering than it was when I was going through school, but even then was part of it. Entrepreneurship is a group sport. And so part of the big thing that we learn as engineers is to work with people who are in other disciplines around solving problems, because the problems we deal with, particularly in engineering, are complex. They're not typically about simple little things that a single engineer can work on. You're dealing with people in a variety of different walks of life who are going to be users, or other people who are actually in the development side of it. And that ability to work with others is core to being successful as an entrepreneur. There's no way that any one person, with very rare exceptions, is capable of doing everything by themselves. So you're going to be working with other people, you're going to be engaging with other people, and that ability to work and engage with other people to bring up a bigger opportunity was core to my education, my background in engineering.
Natasha, Phil, the question was, what is it about engineering that leads to people that can do well in entrepreneurship?
Want to go first, Natasha?
Sure. I just want to point out, I love Jeff's point about the teamwork aspect. That's such an important part about entrepreneurship. So I love that he pointed that out. I think one of the things, and this might be more personal experience on my part, but going through sort of junior high, high school, most engineers, right, we're fairly good at science and math and some of those questions. Sometimes that puts you as a little bit of an outsider, sort of in those popularity contests at high school. So I think a lot of students that end up being engineers sort of get comfortable being maybe outsiders, not necessarily fitting in. And as an entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable sort of stepping outside the boundaries and walking that own path. So it's sort of more of a softer skill, but I think we sort of naturally have that head start on some other potential faculties or studies that we are more comfortable, you know, trying new things and experimenting and, like I said, stepping outside the box and just having that courage to, again, to what Jeff was saying, go outside the status quo. Sort of gives us a weird view on the world that we can take that, find opportunities and run with it. I know that's not like a straight skill, but I think it's sort of a unique lens that engineers sort of bring to the world. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in.
And Phil, why don't you wrap it up?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I think both those are excellent points. I think there's a common theme between the three of us, which is interesting and noteworthy. We didn't all come out of the gates and think we're going to be entrepreneurs. We had to be sort of unsettled with something we needed to come over that hurdle of becoming an entrepreneur is a little bit of a risk, you know, in some ways, especially back, you know, I'll date myself like 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was just, you got an engineering job. It was pretty easy to get a job in my day, very comfortable, you know, sort of safe environment, and just having enough sort of dissatisfaction to get over that hump. It's sort of required, I think. So to me, entrepreneurship is the cross section of that little bit of dissatisfaction that gets you over that hump. And to Jeff's point, which I thought was really excellent, it's you see problems and you want to make them better. You see opportunity. And I remember even back in my engineering days, I would sit in a meeting and there were things that would be going wrong. And I'm just like, I'm going crazy. I just want to solve these problems. I can't sit here and listen to all these things and not want to take action. So I think that, you know, that's inherently a bit in the engineering mindset, that you want to take action and solve problems. And you don't want to sit and complain about them. You're just like, okay, let's get into it. Let's solve these problems. And the other thing that I think is really key is that I believe that a successful entrepreneur, or what makes an entrepreneur successful, is a desire not to just go out and make money, but a desire to want to make the world a better place in a small way, and to want to add value to people's lives. And I think the difference between an entrepreneur that won't really make it and one that will are those values, those fundamental values. So if you have a fundamental value of, you know, I see this problem, I want to make this better, I want to make these lives better in this way, whatever way it is. And then around that, you build a business versus I want to make a whole bunch of money. You know, how should I do that? Oh yeah, this product seems like it'll sell. I'll make a whole bunch of money doing that. You know, I don't see those businesses as successful. So to me, the advantage that engineers have is they're not usually coming from that I want to make a whole bunch of money mentality. They're coming from, I see this problem that I want to solve, you know, that the world needs a solution to. And that's their angle, that's their point of view. And I think that point of view is powerful and unique, and completely essential to a successful business.
All three of you spoke a little bit about the engineering mindset is one that can solve problems. And that makes me think that in your entrepreneurial journey, there's certainly been some challenges. And I wonder if you could each speak to one or two of the sort of big challenges that you faced and how you got through them. Maybe start with you, Phil.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's so many, it's hard to just pick one. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges I faced in the beginning was I was a coffee lover. I was an aficionado. You know, I sat at home, I sipped my coffee, I you know, waxed poetic about it. And then I had to bring that to the real world where people weren't necessarily as enthusiastic as me. I have this little anecdote I'll share. So this is probably the first month of business, and we'd opened our coffee shop, and a customer came and they were ordering coffee, and they said, "I'll have a regular coffee, please." And I was all like zealous, and I said, "There's nothing regular about our coffee." And I was sort of like, I didn't mean to be, but I was a bit confrontational, and it kind of like, I shocked them a bit with that response. And my intention was just like, I was excited, I was passionate, I had zeal. But I needed to learn how to connect with people where they are. And when you're an entrepreneur, you have customers. And in some way, shape, or form, you have customers. And you have to learn how to connect to your customers and connect what you're offering to them and make those linkages. So for me, one of the big challenges was taking my passion for what I wanted to do and what I deeply cared about, and actually making it sort of digestible and being able to connect to a customer where they are from their point of view. And so that sort of empathy for where they're coming from, what their concerns are, needing to bridge that gap between, I was so convinced this is the greatest thing, and just making that bridge was a big challenge for me. And it took me maybe a decade to really learn how to do that well.
Jeff, what about you? Can you speak to one or two challenges and what you did to work your way through them or not?
Yeah, I would agree with Philly. You're going to run into numerous challenges, and the life of an entrepreneur is in no way a wonderful, everything's roses type of path. You're going to run into all sorts of challenges. The first thing out of the gate, so the one I talked about when I started with the friends of mine in university, or friends of mine when I got out of university and went to my first company, we were doing a fantasy football application. Now you have to imagine this is in the day that was really, in some sense, prior to the internet as we know it. So I'm dating myself. It's quite a long time ago now. But we started on this path. We were developing it. We were getting some traction, and then Yahoo came out with a free version of it, which completely wiped out our market. And so, what did we do? We folded our shop at that time, but we learned a lot of lessons from that in terms of things we would do differently in the future. And this is the biggest thing I think that any entrepreneur has to learn is, failure is normal. And it's a learning experience. It's something that you pick yourself up from. You kind of dust yourself off. You learn what lessons you need from that, and you go on to the next thing. You don't let it bring you down and push you into a position where you're stopped and you're just going to not do anything at all. So this is a normal path for any entrepreneur, and I've run into this numerous times during the process of building things. And even with my latest company, we were developing a technology for the oil and gas industry. We were getting great traction in the oil and gas industry, and we're just starting to launch the product. And the downturn of 2014, 2015 hit, and almost literally overnight, the marketplace that we were addressing disappeared. And it wasn't because the technology was wrong, it's because the world shifted and the marketplace that we had wasn't there any longer. And so we ended up having to pivot and go into a new area of technology to be able to survive, and put a tremendous amount of personal investment in the company to keep it going through that downturn. But the result is now a company that's growing and striving and doing all sorts of amazing things. And so, we could have taken that as, okay, let's fold up our tent and go home. But we chose, or I chose in particular, to learn from that and say, okay, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? So I think this is a common thing. And but one thing I would also say, and this is the other thing that really defines an entrepreneur, is it's a mental game more than anything else. And the support system you have, and whether it's your family, your friends, your colleagues, those are critically important to you getting through this, because not only do you need them when you're going through these kind of downturns and things aren't going the way you want them, and you kind of have that support network that helps you get through it, but they're also there when you celebrate the highs. It's an amazing benefit to having these people that can say, yeah, that was amazing, and we're so proud of all the things we managed to accomplish together. It makes it that much better. And so having this, and this comes back to this team environment concept, right? It's a team engagement. And there's people that are directly involved in your business, but there's all sorts of people that are peripheral, your community of people around you that are supporting you, that's really critical to your success.
Thanks, Jeff. What about you, Natasha?
Yeah, no, I love that. And speaking of sort of shifts in market, obviously travel right now with COVID is not the ideal industry to be in. So
yeah,
we're going through a lot of this right now ourselves. And, with people not traveling, that kind of sideswiped a whole majority of our revenue stream. So we've, similar to what Jeff was just saying, sort of take those opportunities as chances to sort of reevaluate our business model, and is there other areas that we can be offering value. So that's an ongoing challenge that we're going through. But I also want to sort of touch on something that I don't think is talked about enough in the entrepreneurship space, and that is imposter syndrome, really. So back to the mindset of being an entrepreneur. I think we see all these glossy magazine covers and unicorn stories, And we assume that these entrepreneurs have it all figured out, right? So it's easy to compare yourself to them and say, well, who am I to be an entrepreneur if that's what an entrepreneur is? So I think working through those internal struggles of saying, like, am I the right person to do this? You know, what gives me the skills to think I can be an entrepreneur? So I think that's been a challenge that I've constantly been working on, and I'm still working on. But to Jeff's point, surrounding yourself with people who, you know, can bring you back down to earth, but also challenge you to push yourself, I think is critical to making sure that you push yourself forward. And it's one of those things where it's one step at a time. It's easy to get overwhelmed by all the things that you have to do to get to some goal. So just kind of grounding yourself in the knowledge that whether it's from your engineering degree, whether it's from your work experience, you have something to bring to the table, and counting on those and sort of taking one step at a time has been really critical in sort of shifting my mindset anyway on how I approach any challenges.
Why don't we elaborate on that a little bit more, this feeling of imposter syndrome, or comparing yourself to the people that seem to overnight make a multi-billion-dollar company. Phil, have you ever been in that type of position, and how'd you get through it?
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure. I mean, I think any entrepreneur has. You know, I think just going back to a point that Jeff made, just to emphasize, and it does connect with this, being an entrepreneur is about, well, Natasha said it too, about adaptability. So you have to be ready to see a problem and then shift, and you need to be able to do it quickly. And I look around and I think, what's the difference between me and anyone that could start a coffee company? And I think the big difference is really, I'm very comfortable with adapting. So, you know, if we get new information today, we can drastically change the direction that we're going on a certain thing very quickly without too much hesitation. And I think in many ways, COVID has just accelerated that. You know, it's made me challenge every decision we've made, and in a way that has actually almost made my decision making easier, because it's just sort of said, well, what do I have to lose? You know, I can even adapt even more quickly. So for me, I look at some of these really successful entrepreneurs, and then I look at how much we kind of slog it from day to day, how much work I've put in over the last 12 years, and how much work it is to make $1 in business. And then look at this, and I, you know, there's a certain like envy you might have to see the scale which these people have obtained. But then you also can look at the things they've done, and you can look at that as opportunity for learning. So yeah, there's no question that there are days where I feel a bit like an imposter, but I think you get over that in time, and you build confidence, and you kind of realize that you can do this. And it's just sort of like anything, I guess. It's learning how to do anything. In the beginning, you feel a lot of uncertainty about your ability to do it. I felt that way when I started engineering. I thought, how am I going to get through this? It's an enormous amount of work at university, but you know, you figure it out day by day. You tackle each challenge as it comes, and you slowly build confidence in your ability to do it. So to me, it's you know, I guess having that initial belief in yourself that you can do it, and then just going for it, and then adapting.
Jeff, do you want to add on that at all?
Yeah, what Phil says really makes a lot of sense to me as well. You know, the nature of the game is evolving, and adapting to circumstances as they come along. And you know, there's somebody commented the other day in some article that was written, I think, about something that I was doing, whatever. And I looked at it and said, oh, well, that's a very interesting perspective on it. That's reflecting a point in time. What it doesn't reflect is the 7 years of slog that took us to get to this point in time. And so I think in a lot of cases, and Natasha is absolutely right, you know, they see these, you know, wonderful glossy examples of successful entrepreneurs, but what they don't tend to talk about is all the work it took to get to that point. And so, you know, it may have been in a previous company, it may have been in previous things they did, but there's a tremendous amount of background behind the success of people that allows them to get to the point where they're at. And what's reported is typically just the end point, not the journey that took us to get to that point. And so I think this is the nature of entrepreneurship, is you've got to deal with the ups and downs. And someday, hopefully you get to the point where you get this major glossy, wonderful thing talking about you that says how wonderful you are and the overnight success you've gotten to. And the reality is it's not overnight by any means, but that's, we like to talk about these hero syndrome, and this is the nature of it. We put on a pedestal these people that have done amazing things, and we don't really think about all of what it took to get there. And this is not just the physical, but also the mental, the social, all the kind of stuff that's going into actually becoming that person. So there's a lot of stuff, the backstory behind these things that we have to realize when we're an entrepreneur. It's not all roses, as I said. And there's a lot of ups and downs on the journey to becoming successful as an entrepreneur.
You all have the entrepreneurial spirit. You're serial entrepreneurs. We've talked a little bit recently about some of the challenges, but why don't you talk about some of the excitement? What gives you a lot of energy to do this and to continue to do it? Natasha?
Honestly, doing things like this, just having that opportunity to give other aspiring entrepreneurs, people that are maybe thinking about it, help them maybe see themselves as an entrepreneur, as someone who can make a positive difference in any industry, right? It doesn't have to be in travel or anything, but I know having that person to sort of plant the seed and sort of say, maybe I could do this, right? I see incredible opportunity in that, and that just sort of humbles me to sort of get these opportunities. I think too, just like, again, we're a travel company, so we have partners all over the globe. And I get so excited when we connect with a new operator, when we have an Instagram live with one of our partners, and making those personal connections. It just sort of re-emphasizes the fact that, we are all people, we are all going through this journey kind of on our own road. So bringing all of the craziness that surrounds building a business down to it's about the people, I find that incredibly refreshing and motivating to keep going. One of the things that I've found throughout this journey is we're all just trying to figure it out, right? It's easy, again, to think that everyone else has the answers, everybody else knows what they're doing, but once you're down there talking to your customers, having those interactions and realizing that everyone's just trying to do their best, I find that gives me energy and motivation to keep going. So that fuels me when times get tough, for sure.
So Phil, when coffee's not fueling you, what gives you that spark and that energy that makes you love the path you're on?
Yeah, I think this is very cliche, but it's in a simple way, it's about making the world a better place and adding value to the world. And I think if we go back to the fundamentals of what entrepreneurship, what a business is, a business was, I have this thing, I have this product, I have this thing I can make that you don't know how to make, you don't know how to do. Let me do this for you, and you're going to love it. And maybe you trade something for it, or you give me money or whatever. But the point is that I'm bringing something to the world to make it a better place. And that's what I love about it. I love looking at, okay, I'm going to completely change people's perspective on coffee, and I'm going to change the lives of a coffee farmer. And all these, like, they're all small, but the idea of being able to bring value to the world. I spent many years, I did this long European trip. I traveled for almost a year through Europe, and it was an amazing adventure. It was intense living. At the end of it, I thought, wow, this was amazing, but what have I given back? What have I been able to, how have I been able to contribute? And so even though the experience was amazing, there was something missing from it. And the thing I love about business is that every day I can think, how can I contribute? How can I add value to people's lives? How can I give back? And so that's what gives me energy. That's what drives me thinking, I'm going to do this. It's going to be great. It's this opportunity to be able to contribute. That's what I get excited about.
That's great. What about you, Jeff?
I think both Natasha and Phil said it well. And it's reflected in also the stuff that I've been doing with Schulich, as well as the university more broadly. I really get my energy from realizing the things I do make a difference in people's lives. You know, and that can be as simple as you know, a single person, but it's more, and particularly the stuff we're dealing with now, it's more organizational or even industry wide, the things that I'm involved in. And so these are things that are going to fundamentally change the lives of many, many people, and that matters to me. I really think that's important criteria for this, and I can do it in a way that actually supports a business, and that also supports employees. And it's fundamental to me as well is that we're successful, which means that people that were employed are successful. They love what they're doing. They're passionate about it every day. They come into work, enjoying what they're doing, and that comes then back to the clients that we're working with, the partners we have. Because we really feel that as a company, we partner with organizations, we partner with our clients because we're going to try and find out what's best for them. And I'm not flogging something that's this is a wonderful thing and everybody would love to have it. I'm really working with the client saying, okay, what is your need? What's the thing that's actually causing you pain, and how can we solve that for you? And so that fundamental approach to really looking at it from the perspective of what's going to add value to your life and how am I going to make your life better, this is what we built our business around.
That's great. Thank you all. We'll shift gears a little bit, and now it's your time to give some advice. And let's start with somebody who's just finishing off high school, and they think they might want to go down the entrepreneurial path. What advice would you give them?
Run away. Go for it. Yeah. So, yeah. Go ahead, Natasha.
Try as many things as you can.
Yeah.
There's learning in every opportunity, and it sounds like we've all, after we graduated, we went into the workforce, we got experiences doing different jobs, learning different skills. And I think all of those experiences help piece together, like what Phil was saying, right? What's wrong with the world? What could I potentially fix? So go out, don't think that you have to have it all figured out when you graduate, even if that's not deciding to go to college, even if that's going to travel. There is value in all of those experiences. So don't be intimidated that if you aren't sure what you want to do, that's fine. None of us thought we were going to be entrepreneurs, right? That's all part of your journey, and there's experiences that lead up to that point.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so that's great, Natasha. I think there's that. The piece of that is sort of humility. The humility to know you don't know everything. The humility to know there's a ton to learn from so many different environments. And then the other thing, again, that sort of dovetails with what I was saying before, is stop and think, like, what are my motives? Why do I want to do that? Why do I want to be an entrepreneur? Why do I want to start this business? Because I think the motive is eventually going to result in the success or failure of your business. If your motive is, I think I could sell so many of these and make a ton of money, I think that eventually will result in failure. People will see through that eventually. It doesn't have the authenticity. But if your motive is, I think that this idea could make people's lives better, and your motive comes from that sort of value add, contribute to the world point of view, then I think that's, as a starting point, that's essential to actually succeeding as an entrepreneur. So I would say, the two pieces of advice are, like, have the humility to realize you don't know what you don't know, be willing to go out there and learn, and then have sort of take a moment and make sure that you're coming from the right point of view, with the sort of right perspective on why you're doing it.
Yeah, great answers, both you guys. The other one I would add, which kind of levers on what you're saying, Phil, in particular, is that be willing to listen and become a good listener. I see way too often, particularly in the technology industry, a lot of wonderful solutions in search of a problem. And that's great. You're trying to solve a problem and you think you've got it, and you build this wonderful thing. You spend a whole tremendous amount of time building a solution for something that nobody cares about. So you need to be able to listen. You need to be able to really effectively understand why somebody would care about what it is that you're doing, And more so, even what is their challenge in the first place, so that when you create a solution for that challenge, they're willing to buy it. If you're not willing to listen, if you're not actually willing to go out and find out what people would be interested in, then you're going to create something that nobody cares about, and it'll be a good experience, but it's not ultimately going to be successful for you. So that ability to listen and listen effectively to what your clients are actually wanting. And you said this earlier, Phil, with regards to you're passionate about coffee, but people aren't necessarily sharing the same passion as you. So that ability to step back from your passion and actually listen to what they really want, and then provide that. That's really key to being successful as an entrepreneur.
But one of the questions that's come in, and we'll start going through questions now. So if other people have questions, please post them in the Q&A. And this is one from Craig, and he says, many startups seem to begin with exit in mind. And I wonder if you could talk about this exit mindset versus not having an exit plan. Should every company have an exit mindset? Maybe Jeff, let's start with you on that one, since you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah, no, it's, I always found that to be I always say it, it depends on the road you take. So if you're getting investment into your organization, external investment into your organization, the investors want to get something out of it eventually. So the exit essentially is, how does somebody who's invested into this organization get value out of their investment? And that can be from a variety of means, depending on the nature of the organization. It could be that your organization gets sold off to somebody else, and so there's the cash that's generated from that is then provided to the investors. It could be you go public, and therefore you're on the public marketplace, and now people can sell shares and trade shares and so on, and you can get cash from that. And there's a few different means for accomplishing that, but it really becomes from the investor mindset of how do I get value out of my investment. From an entrepreneurial mindset, I've never started a company looking at how I'm going to get out of it. I go into it trying to solve a challenge. I'm going into it trying to make the world a better place. I'm not going in to try and, to Phil's point, I'm not into it to say, okay, how can I quickly make a bunch of money out of this and go into the next thing, which is really the exit mindset, which is really the investor mindset. We've been very fortunate in that to date, we've never had an external investor in our company. So we've been able to follow the path we want to follow. That's caused us some grief because we didn't have a massive, chunk of cash sitting behind us that allows us to get through some of the ups and downs cycles of this whole thing. But it's also allowed us to really direct our path. But when you go down and you get investors into it, then you have to really, really strongly consider, these are the people that believed in you. They put money into what you're trying to accomplish. They want to get some value out of this. How do you provide them with that value? And that's where that exit mindset typically comes from.
Yeah, I think
but I certainly didn't as an entrepreneur. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Natasha.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
What I might do is I might just ask one question per person here, just so that we can get through. We got a lot of questions coming up. Next one I want to ask is one that came in a little earlier, and it was about the importance of empathy. Is that an integral part of being an entrepreneur when you're thinking about in terms of customers and employees? And I wonder if one of Phil or Natasha, if one of you could speak a little bit about the importance of empathy in your entrepreneurial journeys.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I actually came to that word as we were discussing this sort of, Bill and Natasha, or sorry, Jeff and Natasha, both bringing up these things that connected. The word empathy came right into my mind, and it's something I think about all the time. Empathy, I would say, is essential, because empathy allows you to be able to connect, again, to these customers that you're trying to serve and understand what their needs are. Because again, if you don't understand their needs, you're not going anywhere. You can have this great idea, and Jeff said it great, like, a solution looking for a problem. But if you don't have the empathy to be able to understand, what's my customer looking for, you won't be able to possibly create that solution that they're looking for. And furthermore, even if you have this amazing product, you won't be able to connect to a customer to actually be able to sell it. To my point, when I started out, I was zealous and I was all, passionate, but I didn't know how to connect to my customers and see where they are and bring them into the world that we've created. So empathy is something I think about every single day. And obviously my business is effectively retail, my cafes. So it's very, very customer service, one-on-one oriented. So empathy is something that's relevant for all of my staff too. So it's something I'm looking for in each person that works in our cafes, is that ability to be able to be empathetic, to say, you know, a customer's problem is my problem. A customer's enjoyment is my enjoyment. But I think that extends everywhere. I think that extends to every business, especially if you look at online tech. Like if you think back to what's the best support I've gotten from a company, it's you've gotten the best support when your problem has become their problem. And you felt dismissed and frustrated when your problem has not become their problem. And that is the essence of empathy. So I think it's very insightful, whoever asked the question, the importance of empathy.
Natasha, do you want to add to that and maybe take it a little further and give some thoughts on, can we teach students empathy, or how can you learn empathy?
Well, that's a great angle on it. I agree with Phil 100%. I think empathy is key to any successful business. If you don't have that customer in mind, then you're not solving anything for them. So in terms of how we teach empathy, I think exposing people to different backgrounds and different situations and explaining to them, or giving them that opportunity to put themselves in that person's shoes, right? So from an entrepreneur journey perspective, right, a lot of that comes from talking to your customers, trying to understand their point of view without necessarily telling them what you're building, but just trying to understand the problems that they're facing, what they're doing to solve it currently. So I think a lot of it comes from conversations, and it starts with who you think you might be solving a problem for, right? So if you're a student and you have this idea for something, if you have an idea, hopefully you're coming from there's a problem, let's build a solution, as opposed to a solution to a problem. Think of who you might be solving that problem for, go find them and talk to them. Find out if they are actually having this problem that you think they have. Through those conversations, you start to understand how they're feeling about it. Is it something important enough for them to be solving? Is it something that they would potentially pay for if you do go down this road? So I think having those conversations, getting comfortable having those conversations, and getting comfortable not getting the answer that maybe you were hoping for. I think all of those things potentially me personally was one of the things I did maybe too late. I thought I had this great idea. You do all sorts of work to get there. And then once you start having those conversations, you figure out that maybe you went down the wrong road a little bit and you have to pivot. So I think having those conversations up front, getting comfortable having those conversations, I think will lend to a much more effective path going forward. So yeah, having those opportunities to have conversations with people of different backgrounds and experiences, I think will help lead to empathy.
I think Natasha really said, like you said it right there. You need to spend time in the problem space. You need to spend a lot of time in the problem space. If you're not in the problem space, however it is that you're going to get into it, maybe you're talking to customers, maybe you're living the problem. You need to be in the problem space before you jump to the solution space. And that spending time in the problem space will let you have the understanding of what to do about it.
Yeah, I would add, I concur with both you guys. It's a critical aspect of understanding it. And, there's the old saying of walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. You have to understand not only that it is a pain for them, but why it's a pain. Why is this important to them? And that is key to the empathy side of it. You really need to understand their perspective in order to be able to provide a solution which addresses it.
Still there?
I think Bill is frozen now. Actually, I'll give you just along that line. One of the ways that I learned that whole process for entrepreneurs. So I started out deeply technical. I designed satellite ground stations. I did all sorts of cool large-scale systems engineering projects and so on. But when I took a job actually being in support of pre-sales for a technology company, doing telecommunication devices, actually kind of evangelizing what ultimately became what we think of right now as cellular technologies. I did that for 5 years, where I was literally in front of different clients every day, 5 days a week, all over the world. that training and understanding people's perspectives and really from a business development perspective, not only understanding what their pain is, but how to solve that pain, that was fundamental to my ability to build a business ultimately. And so, we tend to, at least at the time when I came through engineering, we tended to look at sales as the dark side. Okay, you're in engineering. If you go over to sales, you've gone onto the dark side kind of thing. But the reality is that was core to my learning about business and learning how to apply all the stuff that I had in engineering and my background into a business context. So embrace that variability of experience, because that'll give you perspectives that allow you to do things you wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Thank you, Jeff. One of our earlier questions was an engineering graduate who's now pursuing an MBA, and it's all about how much can you learn about entrepreneurship in school, for example, in an MBA or in your undergrad, and how much do you have to learn by just doing it?
I'm gonna plug CDL here for a minute, particularly on the MBA side. So I agree. I think being in it and doing it is the best way to learn. There's value in some of the schooling, the education piece of it, but particularly for MBAs, they have the opportunity to go through the MBA CDL program where we actually pair them with ventures who are going through a lot of this. So I think universities have an interesting role to play in providing those opportunities to students to sort of get their hands dirty and see what's actually going on behind the scenes, because I do think that that's the best way to learn.
As someone that has never done an MBA, and so I can't speak with authority on this, I'll tell you, I think it could save you a lot of time, because I, had no business background whatsoever, and I had to learn everything, and it was just a lot slower, and I made a lot more mistakes. And yeah, it steered my business in different directions perhaps, but I have to say, it might have saved me a lot of time, a lot of grief, to have some of that background knowledge through that further education, in order to sort of, I don't think it changes the fundamentals of everything we talked about today, but I think it can give you a leg up and can certainly speed up, maybe cause a little bit less pain through the process.
Had a really neat question here that just came in. Do you think you would have been successful in your business if you were not an engineer?
Not in my current business. All the stuff we do is highly technical, so it's really, having an engineering background has been critical to our success, at least in the current business side.
What about you, Phil? Chemical engineering, great coffee company.
Electrical engineering.
Oh, electrical, yeah, control systems then.
It's interesting. I think about this a lot, and it's hard for me to tell you, okay, there's no question it would have been different, my business. Like I was reflecting on this just before this discussion. I think I've written about 20 pieces of software for my company for totally different things. Everything from label printing to our roaster control software to our donut planning software to just, it's huge. So I can't tell you I wouldn't have landed and ended up here in coffee, but there's no question it would have been a completely different incarnation of what our business is and how we function. Now I think we didn't really get into this, but there's something about the engineering program, at least in my day, and I'm confident it's similar. It's really difficult, and so having to get through that program and having to manage the workload and the sheer amount of things coming at you and the daunting amount of labs and tutorials and assignments and having to find a way and the work ethic to get through that, whether it's engineering or whether it's a different program that's equally difficult, that prepares you for the difficulty and the workload and work ethic required to be an entrepreneur. Because make no mistake, this is something I tell people. People approach me all the time and say, I want to start a business. What's it going to take? I say, okay, take 5 years of your life and be prepared to do almost nothing else, because it's just going to consume you. And if you really want it to succeed, you have to be willing to go the distance. Now, if I did it again, maybe I would be more efficient. I wouldn't need to do that, but that was required. And so an engineering background, if it's not engineering, something that was really hard, something that you had to prevail through, that you had, a really difficult challenge that you had to get around to prepare you for it, I think is required and is essential.
Let me just ask another one of our audience's questions that relates to that, and it's about traction. How long did it take to figure out your business, your entrepreneurial idea is having traction, and how do you tell? Jeff, for example, you went through this must pivot moment. How did you know if you were getting the traction you need? I think this speaks to all of you, but why don't you jump in on that one? How do you know if you're going in the right direction?
Somebody's willing to pay you money to do it, ultimately. I'm being a little facetious, but seriously enough, it really comes down to that. Are you really getting people not only saying, but doing things that show that they're willing to pay you for whatever you're providing? And it may be early stage, so you don't actually have cash in hand, but you have commitments towards where you're going with what you're trying to accomplish. That speaks volumes. And again, it comes back to this thing we talked about earlier is, don't create a solution and look for a problem. Address a problem, have people really behind you saying that, yes, if that is available, I would buy it. Natasha spoke to that quite well in terms of validating that what you're doing is actually something that people would pay for. That's when you know you have traction. Beyond that, it's all kind of, you can fool yourself. And it's quite easy as an entrepreneur to fool yourself and you've got this wonderful idea and everybody should love this. But when you validate it with actual people who would pay for it, that's when it really hits the road and you can determine whether it's really going to have traction or not.
Yeah, I agree completely with that, and just want to make the point that you don't always get it right out the gate, right? Like you'll try something, you'll put it out there, you'll get some feedback, you'll feel like you're spinning your wheels, but that's when you iterate and you change something. And then once you've hit that point where you are solving something, and whether it's through money, whether it's through LOIs, right? Then you start feeling that, okay, now I've hit something, and then you start building on that. So I know it can be intimidating that, like, what if my initial solution doesn't solve everyone's problem? You have to put something out there so you can start getting those data points and start iterating. So that's something to go through.
That's yeah, I totally agree with Natasha. I think you have to be extremely honest with yourself, like brutally honest. You can't, I've seen it so many times where people invest in a solution and they just can't look properly to see if it's the right solution. You have to be so open and honest and critical and be ready to almost pivot and realize that it's not right. And that's where I think that people have problems identifying whether they're getting traction, because they're not actually honestly looking at it. They're not honestly looking, they're not going back to the problem space and spending time there and saying, am I solving a real problem? Am I actually solving the problem? Because there's so much at stake. And I get it. If you spend all this time on a solution, you really want it to work, because otherwise you feel like you've done it for nothing. But that's actually the problem. And you can spend a lot of time spinning your wheels in that place where you want so badly for your solution to work that you keep pushing it, but it's not the right solution. And you need to step back and be really honest about how you need to pivot or change or adapt or iterate to create the right solution.
One of the things we hear about entrepreneurs is you got to be able to give the elevator pitch, sell something very quickly. And so with the length of an elevator pitch in mind, as we're about to wrap up, I'd like to ask each of you, all three of you said at the beginning, you didn't know when you were students you were going to become entrepreneurs. So if you were going to go back in time and give your pre-entrepreneurial self an elevator pitch advice, what would it be? We'll start with you, Jeff.
I would say be prepared for a path that's going to take you in many different directions, and don't resist it. Go with the flow. Take life where it leads you. And particularly these days, back in my day, it was not uncommon for people to go on a single career path for their entire life. These days, that's no longer the option. Continuous learning, continuous being curious, and you'll find a path. you'll find out where it goes, and you'll be successful as a result of it.
That's great. What about you, Natasha?
I would say be curious. Don't put yourself in a box, and I think just try things. It's very easy to come out of an engineering degree and say, I've done all this work, I've put all this effort into, getting this engineering degree, I should go do an engineering job. I get this question all the time: geomatics, travel, like what is that all about? But there are so many elements from my degree that have transferred over to a business. So be open-minded, right? I don't want to speak for Phil, but coming out of his degree into coffee, right? Not necessarily the most obvious connection, but use it to define your own path in life. Be clear on what success means to you, which could be an evolving thing. But don't let yourself be defined by what you think other people think you should be doing with your degree.
And Phil, you get to wrap it up for us.
Well, I'm just going to totally repeat what Jeff and Natasha said because they had some wise words. It's about believing in yourself, being adaptable, taking your meandering journey and being okay with it meandering, being okay with going in a direction you didn't expect. And if you're ready to do all those things, and if I was to give that advice to myself, I'd say just take it as it comes and don't worry too much and just go with it. Go with the flow, just like what Jeff said. So.
Jeff, Natasha, Phil, thank you for being part of our panel this morning. I really enjoyed our engagement, and I know our audience did as well. For those of you that joined in as our audience, either through the Zoom or through the Facebook Live, thank you for being part of this conversation today. In October and November, we will be hosting 2 additional Schulich Connects. One is going to focus on digital transformations, and the other is going to focus on the timely topic of ventilation in buildings and the relationship to COVID. I hope to see everybody at those events, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your morning.